Hi, and welcome to the 91 Day Success Podcast. Today, I have got a real treat for you, everybody. I've got Frankie Fihn coming with us, and Frankie Fihn's not even in the U.S., so this is so cool. He gets to come international guest, international superstar, author. If you don't know Frankie, you will by the end of this podcast. Frankie, thank you so much for joining in and jumping on this. I appreciate it. I know we've chatted a number of times before, but for those few people that may not know who the Frankie Fihn is, can you give a kind of a quick elevator pitch on who you are and who you work with?
My man, I appreciate it. That is a hell of an intro. It makes me sound cooler than my wife would make me sound. Yeah, for a lot of folks know me in the agency space. I'm the guy who kind of wrote the book on growing this business without phone calls and meetings. I've grown 3 different actual digital marketing agencies to about 100 plus clients over the years, and for different reasons have restarted them and built it kind of better each successive time. And now I get a lot of joy just kind of paying that back to people who are, 5-10 years before me on that journey. And not that I have it all figured out, but it's kind of amazing how it's kind of taken on a life of its own. Like, I just got a message yesterday morning. It was a guy who, I just read your book and I made 16,000 or 16,500. And it's cool because I just get, strangers messaging me how it's changed their life. And so, it's been a real honor to be able to do that. But that's my elevator pitch.
Well, that's awesome. And again, you and I have talked a number of times, from AI to agency stuff and everything else. And I know you've got that nailed down. Talk to me a little bit, though. I know one of your strategies is how you get clients without paid ads, without webinars, without sales calls. How does that work, as much as you can give away on the podcast? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, actually. And, I'll tell you, if you had told me this, Phil, that you could do this way, I would have just screamed bullshit from the loudest mountain, because, a lot of people can probably relate that, getting agency clients for the most part, or even really getting clients in general, depending on what you got to do, has these long convincing sales calls and they're needed and all these kind of things. So if you had told me you don't have to do that, part of it starts with it. I begin the acquisition process with a different question. And there was a guy in the 1950s who made $500 million importing, exporting. And then towards the end of his life, when the internet started coming in, he wrote a few little books. His name is Jim Straw. And very, very few people know who Jim Straw is, but I'll summarize Jim Straw so you guys don't have to read mountains of his work. But he said that basically that everybody focuses on how do I sell my thing, and he says I focus on finding the buyers. And when I started reading, it was like an aha, because there was probably a 2-3 year period where I spoke at all the legal conferences. I shouldn't say all of them, but a large number of them. I was very active in the personal injury space pre-COVID. Every weekend, it seemed like I was going somewhere speaking. I actually even got named one of the top 100 trial lawyers in America, which is a misprint because I've never been a lawyer for even one day of my life, nor gone to law school. But I'm still pretty proud that, I can show my mom I'm one of the top 100 trial lawyers. And one of the things I noticed is just behaviorally, a lawyer would go to a conference. This is not unique to lawyers, but they would spend $2,000-$3,000 between the price of a ticket and hotels and accommodation, and give up 2 days of working time. And then when they were there, there'd be exhibitors, and they would get a new web design, and they would, hey, that TikTok ad thing sounds cool, and that hiring service, I'm going to give those guys a try. And there's a phone answering service, and I would walk away, and the same people would spend $100,000 on a weekend. And I would watch them do this weekend after weekend after weekend, where they bought. And I make this point because I'm sure some of you guys can relate. As you guys see me, there's a pile and a mountain of books behind me. And I'm a perpetual book reader, as I'm sure you are, Jonathan. A lot of our listeners are as well. And I'm just going to read books till I die. I'm always going to be buying books. In fact, somebody just recommended a book yesterday, and they said, hey, have you read this book? And I said, no. And they said, and then I said, is it worth checking out? And they said, yeah. And I bought it. And that was it. It's because I'm a book buyer. That's just who I am. But if you went and tried to sell a business or a marketing or a personal development book to my brother, I love my brother, but my brother's more like a watch UFC fights kind of guy. And he's never read a book in his life, and he's probably never going to read a book in his life. And you're just barking up the wrong tree. And so I think a lot of the struggles people have is because they're asking a self-serving question, how do I sell my thing? And as a result, they miss the deeper question of who's actually buying it. And so we have kind of a targeted process and it was just really, like I said, I learned this firsthand in the real world at conferences, is I noticed you see the same people at booths over and over and over. You see the same speakers again, and you start to realize the reason they're doing that conference after conference after conference is because it's working, right? Like, it's like they're not just like buying a $3,000 booth for the good of their health. And I started to like break it down, like what else did these other people buy? And I noticed it largely fell into categories. There were the experts, there, you know, like the coaches, consultants, masterminds. There were the content creators, the people who put out the magazines, the books, the podcast, those kind of thing. There were the community owners, you know, the people who organize them into, there were the industry associations, as I mentioned, national trial lawyers and the California Bar Association. And I noticed there were like software and tools, like a lot of the people. And when I say tools in some industries, it's like, it's literally a tool, like the Spray Gun 9000, not just, you know, like the stuff internet marketers think. And then they would go buy conferences and workshops and other events. And then, of course, they bought from competitors. They bought SEO and web design and pay-per-click. And I just started to notice these behavior patterns. And when I took this digital, I realized, like, first of all, we could tap into other people's buyer flow. And then by using basically like making an irresistible offer, that we didn't have to do the regular song and dance that everybody did, right? Like if you come to me with a book, and it's a business book, and you make me a relatively irresistible offer, it's going to be a pretty easy sale. So it's really a combination of those two things. Is I think people miss like really hyper targeting the people who have a proven history of spending money in their market, and then they have resistible offers. And my offer for a lot of years was basically like the typical SEO offer: give me money for 12 months, and pay me a couple of $1,000. And hopefully it works. I'm really good at it. I've made it work for other people, but no guarantees, because Google's kind of crazy. And so I don't really know if it's going to work for sure.
Sounds
they
familiar.
might change the rule. And so in doing that, what happened is, like, that's a hard to sell offer. And I kind of accidentally stumbled on this. Is one day I remember a plastic surgeon, my first niche was largely in plastic surgery. I had a plastic surgeon come to me and said, "Hey, I really want to sell more mommy makeovers." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Do you think you could make me a website for that?" And of course, any of you guys who built a website can confirm, like, it's not really any different to make a plastic surgery site versus a mommy makeover site. Like, yeah, you put different pictures, but the process is like virtually identical. And then he said, "Do you think you could rank that? Like, do you think people are searching for that?" And I pulled up the Google keyword tool. Sure enough, there were searches. And then I looked at the competition a little bit, and it was actually lighter than the stuff we were going after. And I was like, actually, this would be easier. And he said, good. And he signed up for it. And the mommy makeover, like the mini site, build it and rank it. Like anytime I ever presented that to a surgeon, like there was no, give me a proposal, let's talk about it. They just handed me cash on the spot. And that was my first genesis of an irresistible offer. I didn't create it, and I wasn't smart enough to even realize what I had back then. But that's a contrast. And when I really kind of like nail down those two things of, like, we focus on the people who have documented history of spending money, and then like make them easy, irresistible mommy makeover mini site kind of offers, then you can skip a lot of the things everybody says you have to do. And that's kind of a little bit of our secret sauce. And I like to use video a lot to execute that, but the magic is not actually in the video, because I could just as easily do it in text or in audio in a podcast. It's just getting in front of the right people and then making them irresistible offers. You combine those two things, like 90% of it just starts clicking into place, like a whole lot easier than what most people do.
Oh, that's awesome. And it reminds me a lot of a line that one of my mentors continues to remind me and others of. And that's, if you want to make good money, just find a problem that rich people are willing to pay you to solve.
Yeah.
And if you do a good job at it, they're going to line up and be willing to pay you because they want to solve that problem. It's not hard. And rich people often end up being businesses. So, that's really what he talks about there. You mentioned
Can I just
video.
add something on that?
Yeah, please.
Because I've had a lot of people, like, and I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that stops like people in our world from doing it is they see $100 million company on spending all kinds of money on ads, and their first thought is, oh, they've already got it all figured out, they don't need me. And I'll tell you, like, I remember the first time I got hired to consult for a big lawyer in Jacksonville. There's two brothers, and they're the most successful lawyers, and they brought me in to consult. It was actually kind of funny, like, even how I got in there. They said, "Hey, we want to hire you to consult for SEO." And I said, "I don't do SEO anymore. Like I understand it, but like I don't do it." And they said, "That's exactly why we want to hire you, because we don't understand it, and everybody else is going to try and sell us their solution at the end." and you're the only one who has no horse in the race. So you can give us like just a no BS, like we don't even know how to assess these companies, and you do. And so I just, started pulling up all the stats and the metrics and, basic stuff in our world, like, checking backlink profiles and things like that. But what's really, really interesting is when you get into this $100 million company, my first thought was, to your point, like, hey, help solve rich people problems. I'm thinking, I've never come close to $100 million. Like, what on earth am I going to tell these guys about marketing and growing a business that they don't already know? And what's interesting is when you get in on the trenches, you find it's really the opposite, because the amount of things they're managing. So at a law firm that size, they're running like $1 million every like month or two on TV ads alone. So they have to figure out like how to buy the media and creatives and who's managing and who's looking after and who's signing the contracts. So there's a whole group of people and teams and resources needed just for that. They got a bazillion billboards. They have to figure out, again, media buying and remnant and which placements and goes where. There's people and resources needed for that. They're doing radio spots. They're doing SEO. They're doing pay-per-click. They got 17 different websites and variations of their website. And it's the opposite. When you get on the inside, is you realize they actually have more problems, not less. And the reason I say this is because people look at that and they almost always think, I'm going to go work with the guy who's broke and struggling because he needs me, and not with the rich guy who's got it all figured out. And I promise you, like, there's never a point in business where you reach where you're free of problems and it's all figured out. And if you understand that, like, you're actually happy to walk in the door of the $100 million guy, because he's got problems up the yin yang. And often, like, they've had 17 meetings about the problem, but nobody knows how to actually like just execute and get it done, kind of thing. Because it starts to become bureaucratic, and Susie gets promoted just because she goes golfing with Jonathan on Tuesdays, and like that, she's not even worthy of that. Like, all that kind of stuff happens. And like you said, to your point, is like a lot of times we look at those people and think rich guy has it all figured out, and almost always it's really the opposite. It's like those are the people who are bleeding on the inside and would love good help to come in and be able to just take one thing off their plate. Like, hey, don't even worry about that TV thing anymore. I'll buy the media. I'll take care of the creatives. You focus on serving the people who come in the door. I'll take care of the TV, or I'll take care of the internet. And they love that kind of thing. And almost always people look at that and think the opposite. And it's backwards thinking. They think, I'm going to help the struggling person to not struggle, instead of like, I'm going to help a winner win more.
No, and I think, that may be one of the best tips, Frankie, that we've ever heard on this podcast. And that's just the simple fact that you're right. You never get to a point in business where you've got it all figured out. You always need help. You always need that.
Yeah.
And if you're an expert at what you do, it's a whole lot easier to work with that bigger company than it is to work with the little guy with no money. And they're probably going to be less demanding as well. Great insight. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned video.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, just behaviorally, like, usually when they reach a certain size, it's normal for them to outsource and to pay people and to hire things. And so, I see this. I actually remember, like, when, we play around with some revenue share deals, and I pitched a friend of mine, and he's a one-person solo company. Like, he's got like one VA that helps him. And I remember like setting up an email campaign for him. And I remember he was like, you could feel how guarded he was about it. Like, please, like, whatever you do, I want to read every word and make sure, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember, the next day I pitched a guy who's like, who's got 12 different businesses in the real estate space. He's got a coaching business of like 4 million. We talked about doing something there, and he was just like, all right, this is Tyler. He'll get you all the logins. You can send it on these dates. Let me know how it goes. And like, that's it, right? It's like they're used to that behaviorally. And so, as to your point, the little guy was like, I want to read every word, and we got to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And the big guy was just like, here's my logins. Just let me know how it goes, right? And you'd be amazed. You would think just on the outside looking in, like, logic would tell you that there's never there's no way a $4 million company would just hand me their entire customer list and just let me do whatever I want. And you would be wrong in practice, because they do that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's not just occasionally. It happens all the time, because like you said, they're used to that. They know you've got a reputation. You're going to do a good job. They're not worried about that minutia. You mentioned video earlier, and I'm curious, because you made a comment that you use a lot of video, but that you could do it anyway. Talk to me a little bit as things have evolved, and now, of course, the average human being, from what we know, spends anywhere from 2 to 6 hours a day staring at their mobile phone watching video, or maybe if you're old like me, watching it on my TV instead, but still YouTube Shorts and all that. Talk to me about video in today's marketplace. Is it important? What's your perspective on that, and how should business owners be utilizing that?
Oh, my man. Firstly, I just want to say I picture you sitting watching videos on your TV, holding the shotguns, telling everybody to get off your lawn. Unlike you, though, I'm so technology resistant. People don't know this about me, but I actually went 10 years without a cell phone. Like, I was one of the first people to get one before everybody else did, and then I just hated it. And I was like, I don't want to be reachable anymore. There's a period like that. So the magic for me for video, and this is a deeper thing that I've been harping on for anybody who would understand, is Robert Kiyosaki talked a lot about this in his book. For those of you guys who read it, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says that if you want to become wealthy, that you want your assets to make you money, not you. And I think about this like back home in my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. The wealthiest guy I knew back home, he may not actually still be alive because I haven't talked to him in 10 years and he was 80 years old, but not sure. His name is Franco. He's an old Italian guy and he owns 7 apartment buildings and a golf course. And the reason he was so wealthy is because he owned 7 apartment buildings and a golf course, right? It's like, it's not a big mystery why he's wealthy, because his assets, these apartment buildings and his golf course, produce. And a lot of people read that book and found it like super interesting, but found it like not necessarily applicable in the digital marketing space. And what I started to realize as I was doing this is that videos themselves are digital assets. And so the transition that I wanted to make was I wanted my videos to be the revenue producers, not me. And so it was, sometimes it's more of a challenge and it's more work to get it set up. But what happens is if you do it right, video essentially has infinite leverage. So like, you mentioned we close our calls. We don't really have calls, but we close our deals through video. And what happens is once a video converts, like I can drive an infinite number of eyeballs, and every single time, like Frankie Fihn is delivering a perfect pitch. And there was a period in our agency where I struggled with getting salespeople. And it almost brought me to bankruptcy because I was scaling up my operations. And then all of a sudden the sales weren't working when I removed myself from them. I don't know if anybody's ever been in that.
I'd say I've been there.
2016, 20. And I remember I found a few good ones, and it was like a very life-saving thing, but nobody will tell you this about having salespeople in your company is I kind of felt like I had to be Tony Robbins, because there was no such thing as a salesperson who was like on day after day. Like when they would close, 6 out of 8, they would tell me how awesome they were and what a great closer they were. And when they would go 0 for 6, I'd have to talk them off the ledge and be like, it's okay. We'll get more deals later. And there were constantly these highs and lows they would go through. And I constantly felt like I had to motivate them. Even when I had good performing salespeople, like I had to let them know when everything was going well, like there'll be slow times too. Like, don't get so high on your own supply when it's working, and don't get so down. But I never found salespeople like that. Maybe like other people have. But I started to realize when we converted that process to video, like Frankie Fihn just has to be on for 5 minutes. And there's a magic to 5 minutes, by the way, because when I first started doing this, I did it through Loom videos, because like Loom is a free. You guys aren't familiar with it. It's like a screen recording software. So I give my pitch while recording my screen and showing some slides. And I only used the free version because I wasn't sure it was going to work. But in the free version, Loom only lets you record 5 minutes, and it's ruthless. So like if you got a 5 minute and 2 second pitch, like the last 2 seconds don't get seen. So I had to figure out how to like condense it down to 5 minutes. And eventually I have the paid version now, so I can make videos as long as I want. But I forced myself to like work within that constraint of like, how can I just get to the point in 5 minutes? But the magic of it is like, I can be in bed sleeping with my kids, and Frankie Fihn is delivering perfect pitch after perfect pitch. And I'm not feeling like I'm held hostage. And the deeper idea behind it is in our business, in our agency, is like, I want my assets to be working 24/7. I don't want me to be working 24/7. What happens is when you do that, it becomes like, it's more work to set up a 5 minute video pitch than it is to like get on a call with somebody and feel them out. But once you nail it, it's an asset that you can use like again and again and again and again and again and again. And this is how I've kind of set it up down the line, is like literally everything I do is like has some sort of documentation and some sort of asset that is the driver of it. And so the more and more I do this, the more and more I think, I don't want me to be the value in the business. I want the assets. And this is not just true from like a selling perspective, but this is also true of a fulfillment perspective, where I say to people like, if I gave you a choice right now, like I'm going to give you a $2,500 per month Facebook ad client, or I'm going to give you a system that clients are paying $2,500 a month for using Facebook ads. If you're smart, you'll take the system
every time.
But what's amazing to me, But what's amazing to me is in actual practice, most people actually work for the client. Is like they go, and I see this, like, it's really simple. Like, say somebody runs pay-per-click for plumbers, and they set up some, and they pick out some keywords, and they try different ads, and then they try different landing page. And after a couple of months, they dialed it in and they got a system. Well, often I'll see people go, I'm looking for another pay-per-click client. They're looking for somebody to pay them. And that to me is like poor and middle class thinking, because to me, the asset is now you got a system, you got working keywords, you got working landing page. Like, let's lease the system like 10,000 more times instead of like you being the driver of the value and you solving all the problems. And it's a different mentality shift, but that's the deeper idea that I like to talk about behind video, because it's the shift from thinking I'm the value and me and my problem solving skills. And that's like largely, if you look on the pay scale, that's how a lot of upper middle class people work. Like I spent a few years as an engineer. That's how I got paid as an engineer. Somebody brings you a problem, you got to figure it out, you got to solve it. When you switch to like, I'm going to operate like a wealthy person, you're like I'm going to put an asset in place that does the heavy lifting for me. And it's the asset that's going to be the revenue driver. And the amazing thing about it is it blew my mind after you do this is it actually, when it's asset based, when it's like processes and systems based, clients end up happier because it's more predictable, and you end up more free because the value isn't coming from you, it's coming from the process and the system you own. In the same way that like Ray Kroc doesn't have to run out this morning and go flip some Big Macs anywhere. He's created a system and a process that like you can go, I actually went to Beijing, China, and they got McDonald's there, and you can get a Big Mac. It's exactly the same as you would get in Detroit, Michigan, or Honolulu, Hawaii. It doesn't matter. Like, it's the same everywhere because it's a process that he's, created that can be done and repeated at scale. And so that's the deeper idea behind it. So should businesses be using video? Absolutely. Only if you like, like a pull mechanism that works for you 24 hours a day. I actually just logged into YouTube this morning and it said there's been 30,000 hours of my stuff watched. I have no idea how people watched and consumed 30,000 hours of me in the last 2 weeks or whatever it was. But like, that's happening while I'm sleeping, while I'm like not doing anything. Like, that's the real magic of a video, is like it's work to get in place, but once it is, it's a machine that never stops working for you.
No, more golden nuggets. That's so true, and I think I'm probably not the only one that's found myself in that same situation you have, where you're trying to get out of doing the day-to-day sales part, and it's hard to find the right salespeople. I love that methodology of using video to do that. You mentioned in your, well, you didn't mention your book. You just mentioned that you used to be an engineer. If I'm not mistaken, you were a mechanical engineer, right?
That is correct.
How in the world do you go from mechanical engineer to marketing, Frankie? I mean, that is not even the mind shift. No offense to any engineer or to you, but you don't seem like an engineer.
No, I'm not.
How did you make that transition? Tell me about that.
Well, it's just like a lot of people, where I was like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life in high school. And I sit down with the guidance counselor, and they're like, well, you got really good marks in math and science. Maybe you should be an engineer. And in my local area, I didn't really want to go away for school, because it was like I didn't even know what I wanted to do. So like paying the extra money to go somewhere far. And I had a couple of friends that were also going to be in the engineering program. So I thought, like, hey, why not? I can hang with my friends. And then there was a period where like, you go through it, and I'm just kind of going along in that direction because I don't know what else I wanted to do. And it was really interesting, because sometimes like life hands you your biggest blessings in disguise. So I got handed my biggest blessing in disguise. And what happened is, in where I'm from in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, just so you guys know, like it's basically like Detroit South. So it's like Detroit without all the gunshots. But growing up there, it's about 250,000 people, and everybody and they either work for Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler, or they work for a supplier for Ford, General Motors, or Chrysler, or they work for a business that like largely depends on them, like a restaurant that's set up right next to General Motors and needs the people, on lunch hour to come out and, or happy hour or whatever, all those kind of things. And so like, it's just the most normal thing in the world where I'm from, like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. And in 2007, I'd always had the entrepreneurial bug and always had like the side hustle, but I'd never like really fully committed to it and dived in. I was kind of like, I daydreamed about it. I dabbled in it, but I never just said like, I'm going to make this work at all costs, kind of burn the boats. I'm going to do it. And in 2007, even before the 2008 crisis hit, it was felt in Windsor, Canada then. And so I would open up a newspaper, and I still read newspapers back then, if you can believe that. And Ford and General Motors and Chrysler were announcing layoffs galore. They would say like 15,000 people laid off. And when you're in a city where like, I don't know, 250,000 and 10% of the workforce just got fired in one day. And then there's this like ripple effect where the suppliers now have to fire people and the businesses that depend on them. It was like seriously economically depressed. And so I remember actually at one point I went to go apply for a job, and I went to like a job fair, and they had like 50 people there. And at the time, like 100% of them were sales jobs where there was no base. So it was like, you could sell insurance, or you could sell investments, or, like those kind of things. You could go sell solar. All of it, though, you had to hunt for your own lunch. And right around that time, I had a friend of mine, and he was doing real estate in Florida, and he was kind of like a Canadian guy who was a snowbird flying back and forth. And he called me up, and he said on the phone, I'll never forget this phone call. He goes, "Hey, Frankie." I'm like, "What's up, man?" He's like, "I wrote a real estate course, and we're going to sell it on the internet." And I remember laughing at him at the time. I was like, "Matt, like we? Like, no, dude, you're selling your own fucking real estate course. Like that's your job, not mine." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're really good with computers." And I'm like, I don't know how to make websites or sell stuff on the internet. Like, I just know how to play around with it, fix it. And he's broken. He's like, "Well, you'll figure it out." And then he hung up the phone on me. And I remember I was like, the audacity of him, like, "I'm going to sell your real estate course." And I remember at almost within a day, I went to this job fair, and I was just sitting for like 3 days, and I'm like, "Well, you got to do something." And I was like, if you're going to do it, you might as well, like, if you're going to have to sell, like, you might as well sell your own thing. Like, it doesn't make sense to sell somebody else's thing for a commission when you can sell your own thing. I'm like, all right, so we're going to sell the real estate thing. And I started like in my mind, imagining the internet dream long before like people were advertising. I'm like, I could work from anywhere. I could do this. I'm going to drive a Ferrari. That was in my head. I was like, I'm, early 20s dreams. I'm going to drive a Ferrari, and, single guy, those kind of things. And as I was putting this together, I remember like I built this website. It took me a couple of weeks to figure out and like kind of self-teach myself. And as many of you have discovered, like I had like a field of dreams. Like, if you build it, they will come. I just thought, you put up a real estate course, people will come buy it. And I put it up and found out, like, I checked my my website visitor stat log, and there was like 2 people, and like one was a bot from China, the other was my mom. The other was Matt. Like, there was nobody interested. And so I was like, it sent me down this rabbit hole of like, how do you get people to a website? And so I self-taught myself SEO and spent like a year working to rank that website. And we ended up like getting like, I got number 2, and I would sometimes bounce to number 1 very briefly for the keyword real estate investing. And it was such a big high volume keyword. Like, Google would send me 2,000-3,000 visitors every day from that traffic. And I was like, and I still didn't know anything about converting it. We would sell a course here and there. And I still remember actually the first time like somebody bought a course, I remember I called Matt up excitedly. I was like, "Somebody just gave us $47. And he was like, "Who?" And I was like, "That's the best part. I have no idea who they are." We spent like an hour trying to Google this person, but they had a generic name. It was like, David Smith or something. So we couldn't find anything about David Smith. But it was life-changing when we had kind of sort of crossed that world. And it was a lot of work building that site, and we weren't converting a lot of it. And somebody came along one day and said, "Would you be interested in selling me this website?" I don't remember the amount they gave me, but it was more than I was making. And like, just compared to the amount of energy and effort I was putting into like trying to rank it and keep up the rankings, it was just like, it was a no-brainer. It's yours, take it, right? Like, it's like, you send the money, the website's yours, blah, blah, blah. And so we sold it. And I went in this weird period of like, I don't even know what I want to do now, right? Like, that was my baby for the last 2 years. Where do we go from here? And I had like no plans of like doing any more like internet marketing or, selling real estate course or anything. And somebody came along to me and said, you know how you got all that, free traffic from Google? Like, do you think you could do that for me? And I'd never considered doing it for anybody else, but I was like, man, I don't see why not, right? Like, I know how to do it. So they invited me to go try it. And we actually we collaborated on one little project. I didn't know this at the time, but this would be the beginning of what became my white label agency. And white label didn't even have a term, but it was just a guy who sold a lot of plastic surgery websites. He went to all the conferences. His wife was a plastic surgeon, and he sold a bazillion plastic surgery. Like he had like 300 or 400 different websites he would sell a year. Like they were cranking out 1 to 2 a day, and like just doing a ton of it. And I remember like 50% of the clients would say, okay, now that you build me a website, same challenge as me, like, can you rank it? And he didn't really have a good solution for that. And so he had tried hiring like 5 or 6 different people and gave them each one client for like 30 days. And I actually still remember that project because there was a thing that happened back in those days called the Google Dance. And it was like when you built a bunch of new links for a website, Google didn't update their algorithm as fast as they do today. So what would happen is they would lower you in the rankings for like 5, 6, 7 days. Well, they figured out where to place you, and then you would bounce back up higher. So almost always you'd be like, say you're spot 20, you build a bunch of new links, you would just disappear to page 9, and then you would bounce back up to like page 1. And so there's always this limbo period. So he hired me to do this. And in my mind, I was not like seriously considering SEO as a path or anything like that. And I remember like it was like day 23, and I realized I haven't even done anything at all for this guy. Like he hired me to rank his website, and like I haven't done anything that's going to look really bad in a month. So I'm like, I better do something now today before the Google Dance. So I did it on day 23, and I remember checking his rankings the entire like every day for the next 2 weeks, and he was like disappeared out of the rankings. And I checked on day 30, the last day of the month, and there's still nothing to be seen or nothing to be had. And so I woke up the next day thinking like, well, he's either going to hate me tomorrow or the Google Dance. If I'm lucky, I'll be finished. And I checked, and he was like at the bottom of page 1. So I sent him a message with the update of the rankings, and he was like, holy shit, Frankie, like we were on page 20. Now we're on the bottom of page 1. It's only been 30 days. And then he was like, can you do more of these? And that sent me down this whole journey into starting an agency. I had no idea that that's where I would go. It was just like, he said, I got another SEO client, another SEO client, and then for a while, it was just like 3 to 5 new clients a week for SEO steady for, 6 to 8 months until I had to tell him, like, the guy's name is Rick. I was like, Rick, like, I don't have systems and operations for like, we got 120 people. Like, I don't have enough employees and stuff. Like, you got to take your foot off the gas or you're going to have a lot of complaints later. Like, let me catch up on the fulfillment side to what we've already built. And that sent me down this whole kind of journey of like running an agency. But a lot of the things that in the agency space that we have now, like a white label agency, I was doing even before it had a name. And I'm sure you can relate to that because I know you were in this game for a long time. But I see all these things like you can live the laptop lifestyle. Like I was doing the quote unquote laugh. Even now I see like I've been telling law firms for like 10 years that you guys can hire remotely, and most of the stuff you guys like do, you can just have a VA do, and none of them did it. And then all of a sudden the COVID madness began, and they started hiring VAs because it all became remote anyway. And now I have law firms coming back to me and going, Frankie, did you guys know you can hire VAs? I'm like, no way.
Sometimes it just takes a while for your wisdom to be proven true. It definitely can happen. Talk to me a little bit about the agency coaching and what you're doing now, Frank. I know you run a big agency Facebook group. You give away a ton of knowledge for free. Talk to everybody on here. Again, there's a lot of agency people that are watching. What do you provide to agencies now, and what type of value are you bringing to them? What's that look like now for your life?
Let me tell you the why I got into it. This is another one of those, sometimes life has bigger plans for you. It started actually just because I had no plans to ever coach anybody in an agency ever. And there's a part of it too, like, and I'm sure you can relate to this in business. Like, I don't feel like I've got business figured out. I'm 16 years into it. I still have problems. I still have challenges. I still have stuff that I bang my head up against the wall. I still have days where I want to throw in the towel. So I'm like, I'm in the trenches doing like, and what ended up happening is we had figured out selling through webinars, and I'd like figured out how to close agency clients through running webinars and doing Facebook ads. And I had gotten it down to like a formula, almost a science, where I could like repeat it. And so we were doing probably like 50,000 a month in new business from a webinar. And again, only shut it off on the basis of like, it broke all our fulfillment systems, not because, like it's ever stopped working. And I had a lot of friends that were asking me like, how are you guys doing this webinar thing? How are you doing this webinar thing? And I had found that, I had a couple of people, and I'm sure some of you guys can relate to this experience. A couple of people had asked me, and I gave them the whole farm and showed them how to do it. And the people I gave it to for free didn't do anything with it. And I had one person say like, can I pay you to consult on this? and they did it and they ran with it. And it was amazing to watch the belief and mindset that if they pay for it, they'll actually do it. So I just decided to put on a live event. It was in Toronto, Canada. I want to say it was like 2015, 2016, somewhere like there. And Toronto, Canada was about 4 hours from me at the time. And I reached out to all of my friends that had kind of like either really similar business models, and I had met at different masterminds and told them I was doing this thing. I think we had like 12 people, and it was like, it was cool to me because they all, like it was a high ticket kind of thing. So like, there was a good income. But what's interesting is we finished the webinar after, like, it was a 3-day event, and we were finished everybody's webinar after like a day and a half. And so this was like way faster than I had planned to do it. But because it was small and intimate, we could just do that. And I was like, well, now what? Like, what do you guys want to talk about for the next day and a half? And one of the guys there, he was doing SEO. And so he had like a bazillion questions about SEO and setting expectations and managing the clients and blah, blah, blah. And I had so much fun just like answering it, because it was the first time, like, I had never thought like all the struggles I had went through would ever be useful to any. I was just trying to figure it out for myself. And to a certain extent, I still am now. Right. It wasn't like immediate, but he went home and sent me a message a couple of weeks later, and he told me I just bought a new rental property. He just landed 2 big government. So he was doing like $500 a month SEO for any Tom, Dick, and Harry, and he switched to like creating like a premium solution. He signed 2 $10,000 a month clients, and he was stoked because they're government contracts, so they were guaranteed for like 3 years. So he had like $20,000 a month in baseline that was going to be there, and so now he could like finally like manage his cash flow intelligently. And he was like, just wrote me this long, heartfelt thank you. And I'm sure you can relate to this, Jonathan. I've helped, I don't know, hundreds of people like rank their websites over the years. And I can count on one hand the number of times people said thank you. And so that was actually more meaningful to me than any amount of money or anything like that. It's like somebody just said thank you. Like what you did. And all I did was just like share like what I had figured out. It was just like, just like 2 guys talking like we are now. And it was kind of amazing to me. And it sent me down this, like, that was so much fun. I loved it. I love these people. And like, holy crap, like they all benefited from this in ways I couldn't have imagined. And it came across the board where like, and I still keep in contact with everybody that I started this thing with. And, one of the guys sent me like a big revenue share deal he did with a roofing guy. He like, he closed a $400,000 contract with the guy, and he got his share like 12, 15 grand or something like that. And that was the first deal of many they did. And he was just like beyond thrilled. And I was like, I never imagined like any of the struggles, especially too, because I'm sure you can relate. Like a lot of this you go through alone, because you're like, friends and family cannot relate to our business model and what we're doing. And just like even being in business, and this is true of any business, not unique to us. Like dentist struggles are unique to dentists, only other dentists going through that. And so I decided like it was a mission of mine. Like I have to coach these people, because like I didn't really think my stuff was all that useful to anybody. Like I really didn't. Sometimes you think because like your life is full of problems and challenges, you forget there's people 1,000 steps behind you that would love to be where you're at. Like I look at it now, I keep a gratitude journal, and I'm like, I have to remind myself that like, okay, not everything is exactly how I want it to be. But like, man, like if I could go back 5 years ago and tell myself these would be my problems of today, like I would be thrilled to find out these are the struggles I'm dealing with. And so the agency coaching side is really like, for me, like 16 years of figuring this out. And it's an emphasis on a couple of different things. Is building the business without phone calls and meetings. That's the central theme of it, because I believe this is true of agencies, but it's also true of any service business in general. Service businesses are the easiest businesses to trap yourself in, because you're the deliverable. It's not like an e-commerce thing where you send the plastic trinket and the plastic trinket is the deliverable. You and your expertise and your knowledge and your understanding and your ability to execute it are the service. So it's so easy to trap yourself. And that's the predicament I found myself in my first agency, where it's just constant phone calls and meetings and requests from clients. And when you got like 120 of them, like even if just each one of them wants a 5-minute meeting a week, like that's your whole week. It's just talking to them, right? So it's a heavy emphasis on like, how do you remove yourself out of this business? So it's more like a real sellable machine that can be repeated. And then there's an element as well on what I think are next level marketing strategies. And again, like a lot of this I learned just face to face, being with guys in conferences and seeing how they bought it. But I think like if I summed up 99% of the advice in our space, and this is from a lot of people that I can tell have never done it, but they just say like cold message a bazillion people, like harass strangers in their inbox, book some appointments, do a bazillion calls, and that's how you build this business. And I found that like when I really dealt with like top agencies, that was pretty much never true. I'm not saying like nobody's ever built that kind of agency with, but they were often like experts that spoke on stage, and they had videos and they had podcasts and they had things they had driven to drive their sort of expertise business. And then as well, like, you know, they talked about the whole other dark side of the business that nobody wants to talk about, which is, you know, actually creating world-class fulfillment and building teams and systems and processes so that it's a predictable machine. Because it's, you know, like nobody tells you that, but if you just cold message a bazillion strangers and sign them up and make like pie in the sky promises, like they just demand refunds 3 months later, and you just burn your reputation at the speed of light. Like nobody, I always see like beginners post screenshots of like new strike payment, but I say like nobody posts strike payment 27 you got from a client, goes, look, they just paid me for the 27th month in a row, because they're still happy, right? Like you don't see any of that in our space, and it's not as celebrated, but that's really where the rubber meets the road. And it's really just like taking all the tools and resources and shortcuts we've created. And so we're actually building a now a done for you component. It's what I call my shoe store outreach, which is like I mentioned, like you can build this business by cold messaging 10,000 dentists, or you can find the one guy who's got a podcast with 10,000 dentists who already listen, and go connect with him or her and spread your message simultaneously at once. And it's more about doing outreach like that. It's what I call less but better outreach, because it starts with finding the intelligent targets, who runs the biggest conference, who runs the biggest podcast, and then breaking through with them. And almost always the way to break through with them is so counter to what everybody else does, because what everybody else does is essentially like they send a message that can be summed up as buy my shit. And what we're doing is we're actually giving value first. So it's like, I did this cool thing for you. And if you're wondering why, it's because I want to know you. And so we're just perpetually doing cool things for people that they didn't ask and helping them grow their business. And then inevitably, if they got a show or a stage or an audience, they want to share your stuff with it as a way to kind of pay that reciprocity back. So we're doing that at scale for people. And then also, a lot of what I know is near and dear to your heart is my own sort of video content factory. Again, like I just started out trying to build this for myself. Like there's a couple of things that stop people from making a bunch of videos. That like one is like, firstly, is all the mental stuff. Like, who am I? I don't have anything interesting to say. I smell today. I got a pimple. I can't make a video. I got a pimple, right? Like there's always like those kind of reasons. There's the mental stuff. Then there's the like, what do I talk about? Like, what do I say? What's going to be interesting? Blah, blah, blah. There's the, the actual content. Then there's the editing stuff of like, how do I chop it up and make it and blah, blah, blah. And then there's the fourth part of like distributing it. And I always say, like, I have a mentor who runs a $50,000 video editing agency. And he says, there's a huge difference between like, I have an idea for a podcast, as you can definitely, you talk about on your own after as well, is there's a huge difference between I have an idea for a podcast versus I'm going to schedule it every week. I'm going to book it. I'm going to plan it. I'm going to get guests. I'm going to get content. I'm going to share little pieces of it, and we're going to promote it, and we're going to ask for reviews, and we're going to do that every single week like clockwork, so that a podcast happens religiously, if you will. And there's a huge difference between those two things. And so we're focused on like those kind of things, is taking like somebody has a cool idea to like, let's turn it into a system that happens every week, predictably, like clockwork. So I'm in the process of like hiring and training a bunch of VAs who basically do the stuff they do for me, but now doing it for everybody who joins, because I think a lot of people just really struggle with the implementation side. And I'm a bigger believer, the longer I do this, that expert driven inbound is way better than door knocking outbound. And expert driven inbound is the difference between like, hey, quick question, do you want to buy my 30 to 50 booked appointments? That's outbound, and you're seen as the modern day equivalent of like, a door-to-door salesperson knocking like, hey, do you want to buy my vacuum cleaner? And to me, like, the place I think we should be is more like, I'm the heart surgeon. You came to me because you're interested in heart surgery. How can I help you? Like, tell me where it hurts. Tell me what's going on in your life.
Absolutely.
How can I be of assistance? And I'm a bigger believer the longer I do this. It takes a little bit of extra work to drive the inbound, but the inbound to me is way better than like chasing it.
No, 110% agreed. And I think that it really fits in with what we're seeing happening in the marketplace too. We just saw a huge event happen over the weekend with Alex Hermosi and talking about that. And again, really following, I'm going to simplify, but following that same model you just talked about. He created that expertise by giving away all kinds of value. that
Yeah.
made him an authority in the space. And then when he decided to put a book out, he's able to sell hundreds of thousands of books because he spent 2 years planting his fields, getting ready, doing all those things.
Yeah.
He didn't, it wouldn't, I did a video and it was just me sitting on my back porch, and everybody's missing the point. Everybody's like, hey, we're doing an Alex Hormozy deal because he did this big thing last weekend. And it's like, they're all missing the point. For the last 2 years, he's not had anything to sell. He's just been giving value and value and value and value. When he said he had a new book coming out, I didn't have to sit through the webinar. All he had to do is send me the link.
Yeah.
Then when he told me I could get his stupid hat, if I bought 3, guess what? I bought 3 books. I mean, it was a brilliant upsell. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a lot of what you're talking about. It's plant those seeds, build that authority, make sure that you're seen as an expert in whatever it is you do. And then it becomes a lot easier to sell because, like you said, you're like that heart surgeon at that point. People are coming to you and you're now consulting with them and providing value, as opposed to you trying to go out and, hey, I've got a new book, buy it. Will you buy my book? Will you buy my book?
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I'm seeing people now saying, I'm going to make webinars and give away stuff for free, but they missed the part where he spent 2 years giving away a massive amount of value through a bazillion videos and published them like clockwork and did that. Because like, if you're going to just copy the last tactic in the line, of, you're going to miss like everything that preceded it. That is actually what made it work.
Absolutely.
Like you said, he's and I call that word pre-selling in my world.
Yep.
And he's pre-sold that thing for 2 years, so that, like you said, like, and I'm in the same category. Like, to me, the webinar is almost a detriment. Like, I'm like, I don't got 60 minutes to listen to you talk. Just send me the link and I'll buy it. Right? Like, I don't need to hear what, like, I've seen enough of your stuff. I already know I want to buy it. Just
absolutely
give me the link. Let me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of somebody else I know who does a lot of that and believes in that is Russell Brunson. And he put out a book a while back called 30 Days. And it was basically, he took a lot of people from his ClickFunnels software and said, if they had to start over, what would they do in 30 days to rebuild the business? And I thought that was a really cool concept, but candidly, I think it's a little bit off target because most people, they can't do it in 30 days, anywhere near 30 days. So one of the reasons we have the name for the podcast, the 91 Day Success Podcast, I love to ask guests, and I'm really excited to hear your input. And I know I'm dropping this on you without any forewarning whatsoever. But if you had to start over, or if you were advising somebody, they had to start over, they had $1,000 they'd saved up to start their business. They don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about shelter and all that. They got $1,000 to put in the business. Frankie, based on your systems, your experience, what would you recommend they do in the first 91 days or 3 months to build that business with a goal of hitting that 92nd day and earning 10 grand a month in some sort of recurring revenue? What would you have them do?
Well, I'll tell you the answer, and candidly, the amazing part of this question is that I've been asked this question about 1,000 times now over the last 2-3 years. And it started because when I wrote my book, I really wrote it for agency owners and stuff in the trenches doing it.
Yep.
And I didn't want to be I'm going to sell you the dream that you'll become an overnight millionaire, doing this business. It was more just for like people who are already doing it and dealing with clients and challenges and meetings and fulfillment and teams and all those things. Like, I just wanted to write it for people in the trenches. But because of the whole COVID madness, like, the number of people who got into this business in the last years has 3 or 4x'd easily into like from what I've seen. And so I've had all kinds of beginners come to me and they've asked me that exact question. If you were me, what would you do? And I thought about like all these different ways. Like, maybe I'll just make a course about it, because I didn't really want to like necessarily like coach the beginners, like, because a lot of it is like just telling them to get off the sidelines and get into the game. Like, and I don't say that with judgment, because there was a time where like I dabbled in entrepreneurship for a long time before I just really did it. And a lot of that for me had to be like feet to the fire taken out. But I created a 90-day challenge where I'm like, I'll just do it. I'll do what I would do and I'll document the process. And I'll tell you, the first thing that I started with, I believe that businesses have to be market driven, not personal reasons driven. I'll illustrate a story that makes this point. So my hometown, there's a shitload of auto body shops, like way too many, more than the market needs. It's a car city, so there's just a lot of guys who know cars, and there's like just way too many like mechanics and auto body shops. And I remember I was at my brother's house, And he had ordered some Chinese food. And I remember it was like a big ordeal because him and his wife were fighting. And then, of course, the Chinese guy knocks on the food, knocks on I got egg rolls here, while they're screaming at the top of their lungs. So they're like this big fight of who's going to get the door. 5 minutes go by. He knocks on the door again, but no more, like they already bought the food, and he points, and I don't know if he was texting or whatever, but he had backed up his car. He hit my brother's car that was parked, and my brother's car rolled into my girlfriend's car. And I remember it was actually a funny thing because I was starting to have like really big success in the agency at that point. And I said to her, like, hey, what's your dream car? Like any car and I was expecting like, I want a Ferrari, I want a Lamborghini or whatever. She says, I want a Volkswagen Beetle. And it's like, no, any car, Trish, you can have any car you want. She said, no, I want a Volkswagen Beetle. And I said, okay. And then she said, but I don't like the brand new ones because I don't like the style of it. I like the one that's like 2-3 years old. And I only want it in green or yellow. So we actually decided to buy that car. And it was a whole ordeal trying to find a 2-3-year-old Beetle that was in green or yellow. And the older style, there's actually not that many of them. But because of this, we went the process, at least where I'm at, like when you have like an insurance claim, you have to go to 3 different shops, get quotes, and then you contact the insurance and they say, okay, go with this guy, and you bring it in and get repaired. We went to 3 different places, the ones they recommended, and all 3 of the guys said the same thing. All 3 of them said, we don't work on Volkswagens. They have too many specialty parts, but there's a guy on Drouillard Road. I'm going to give you his contact info and check him out. So we went back to the insurance and they said, okay, bring it to the guy on Drouillard Road. And the guy on Drouillard Road had 2 or 3 weeks worth of Volkswagens that were backed up in the garage, and said, I'll give you this info, give this to your insurance, let them know they'll give you a rental for like the next couple of weeks. You get a loaner car, and I'll let you know when I get to it and I can get it fixed and all that. And so the reason I mention this story is because it illustrates what a market-driven business is because the auto body shops, like 90% of them just start, they do it entirely for selfish reasons. They say, I'm sick and tired of working for somebody else. Start an auto body shop. I'm going to start my own shop. I'm going to be my own boss. And what ends up happening is, in their case, the market does not need another auto body shop. And so they struggle and they hustle and they fight. And it's a challenge because the business was started 100% for selfish reasons. Now, all of us have selfish reasons to be in business. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have those. But the Volkswagen guy has also market-driven reasons, meaning there's actually like a market need for Volkswagens to get fixed. And so I say, like, often the difference between a market-driven business and a selfish, like ideal kind of driven business is like 10%. Like, is it really that different between fixing cars and fixing Volkswagens? So a lot of times people fail to, so this is my way of saying, like, step 1 to me is pick a niche of people. And step 2 is like, listen to those people and see what they're stuck on. Do not go, like, everybody like comes to me and they want to learn the skills. Can I get good at SEO? Can I get good at pay-per-click? And all those skills and things like that are valuable. But I think if you start with the person and what they're stuck on, you'll notice things like, hey, does anybody work on Volkswagens? And you'll notice, like, okay, I can fulfill this need. So like, there's a company in my space that illustrates this perfectly. They're called Alert Communications. They're at least $100 million empire in the personal injury space. And they're an agency. And all they do is they provide virtual assistants who answer the phone for personal injury law firms. And they answer the phone from 5:01 Monday to Friday till 8:59 the next morning, and on weekends. And they're very mediocre at it. They're not like an exceptional business. They just take down the person's contact info and say, okay, the lawyer will call you back in the morning. That's all they do, right? They don't close. They don't book appointments. They don't have any sales training. They're not like super customer service. They just take down contact. But for lawyers, it's worth it because they only have to pay per call, and they got a good offer. And the key I want to make here is they're in a small little mini monopoly category of one. They're the only ones who do what they do. Now, there's probably a lot of people who could answer phones for lawyers, but they're the only ones who stuck their flag in the ground and said, this is what we do. And because they've actually fulfilled a market need, they're a $100 million company, and they're going to continue to grow. And I'm sure somebody will eventually copy them and they'll have competitors. But at that point, they'll be like Coke. They'll have such a stranglehold in that marketplace. They'll be difficult to unseat. So I think step 1 of being in business is not go learn skills, not go do this. It's like, choose a type of person that you would actually enjoy helping, and then spend some time like really listening to and the beautiful thing about the internet, it's made it super easy to eavesdrop. I call this active listening, this skill. You can go into a community. Like, a lot of times people have told me in the agency space, they're like, oh, your copy is like so on point. But I'm like, I just read your shit. Like, I'm just parroting back what you guys just said, right? Like, I didn't just like randomly, have some super secret insight into your head. I'm just an active observer. And when I was building my group, there was nobody active in my group. So I had to go to other communities and just see where the conversations are. Well, your people are having a discussion somewhere with or without you. And you have the possibility of getting in there. And what happens is, like I said, it's only a 10% shift. But once you decide, like, I'm going to be the Volkswagen person, then you could start figuring out like how I'm going to provide like a unique sort of solution and methodology. But I feel like what happens is people struggle because they skip that step. So what I went to my white label partner and said, like, what are some of the industries your stuff works really, really well? And he said, he gave me a list of like 4 of them. And I picked one that's obviously near and dear to your heart, the water damage restoration space.
Mm-hmm.
And so the very first thing I did before I came up with a solution and a package and blah, 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 is I spent like, I don't know, 2-3 hours just reading everything I could about water damage, and even just figuring out where they talk to each other is a whole kind of challenge in and of itself. And what I figured out, just like, learning from them is like, there's a couple of challenges in the industry, and I'm sure this is not news to you, but challenge number 1 is like, they need to get jobs, and they're after very specific types of jobs. They weren't like big flood jobs, category 3, where there's like lots of damages and things like that. Challenge number 2 is like, insurance companies like kind of dick them around on getting paid on the work. So they either try nickel and dime them or stretch it out till eternity. So like, just getting paid for the work they do is another challenge. And the third one is like hiring, building teams, crews, like finding good help. And I realized, like, I could probably help with 2 of those problems. I know how to hire and find good people, and I know how to get jobs. How to get paid on the stuff you already do, that's like just outside of my realm of expertise. But I built the solution out of like what the market was talking about, not the other way around. I didn't go, I do SEO because I went like, hey, this is how I would go and get these category 3 flood jobs. Like, I would aim it at these keywords and do these things. Make sure you have this review process. And so the next thing that I did is like you said, is started planting seeds. Now I think there's a shortcut to this, and the shortcut is going and finding the people who've already spent 10-20 years building up a name and reputation in the industry, right? Like, you could try and be the next Alex Hormozy and make 100 gazillion videos, or you can find somebody who's already spent 20 years putting out 100 gazillion videos. And often in like offline niches, like restoration and things like that, they like need you. Like, they need new content. They need stuff to say to people. So like, I just started like writing for the magazines and contributing value and planting those seeds because I knew they had audience. And then what ended up happening is, we got, it took about 20 days. We got our first like, $6,000 or $7,000 web design project that came to us. And now we just, we signed, I haven't formally announced it because it's not official and in the books, but we just got the first SEO client, and all of it is just based on the identify where the market is already and what they're struggling with, and then contribute value in those things. And the cool thing about like expertise driven business is like, the way you contribute value and have it lead to more business is so simple. Is you give away the ideas for free and you charge for the implementation. And so what that means is, like, if you do pay-per-click for plumbers, just tell plumbers how to do pay-per-click, even if they don't want to hire you at all. Like give them the whole system. Like, you don't have to hold anything back. You can say, these are the keywords we use. This is the targeting we figured out. These are the kind of ads that works. This is how we optimize the campaigns. These are the reviews we use. This is how you got to handle the phone call. Show them the whole system. And what you'll find is 8 out of 10 plumbers who watch that will say, well, that sounds cool, but can you just do that for me? And that's where you actually make your money. And so what I do is identify a market, figure out the needs of that market, build a solution out of it, and then go contribute value to people who have audiences about that solution. And inevitably it comes back to you. And so I haven't actually, and this for me is interesting because I actually had a lot of fear and anxiety about this, just being candid, Jonathan, because it was like, I'm the agency guy. I'm going to show people how to grow an agency from scratch. And then when I got into it, I realized like I only have like 2-3 hours a week to build this like kind of part-time agent. I'm going to end up looking stupid because I said to everybody, watch me grow an agency to 10 or 20K, and then I don't even have time to do it. And everybody's going to go like, look at this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He can't grow an agency on his own, right? Like, yeah, his stuff worked 15 years ago, but like not today, blah, blah, blah. And then what ended up happening is, it works, right? Like if you contribute value on those things and do it. So, we're not quite there, but we're probably about 23 days in, and we're at about 8K a month doing the system we just described. So, that's and I feel fabulous. It's obviously a little bit faster because I've done this before, but I think anybody can do that. I don't think it's like unique to me, and I'm not even really delivering the solutions. I'm just, contributing value in the marketplace. And I think that's a proven formula in any market, is like, choose a group of people you want to help, figure out what problems they are, build a unique solution and methodology out of it, and then go promote the shit out of it until it starts becoming delivery problems.
Perfect advice. I couldn't agree with you more. It fits so much in with what I've been talking to people about topical authority. You need to be that expert. And I love the example you gave. Like if you're doing, SEO, or you're doing pay-per-click for plumbers, tell them how to do it. You can literally tell them every step that you do. And the vast majority of them are going to look at that and go, okay, Frankie, you're the expert. Can I just hire you to do this? Because I don't want to deal with it. And yeah, there's going to be a few people that take your system and run with it, but they were never going to hire you in the first place. So big deal. You haven't lost a thing. No, I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah. So, well, Frankie, I told you I wouldn't keep you over an hour, 100%. And I'm actually 3 minutes over right now. So I apologize.
Mexican internet is not playing ball for a moment.
Oh, are you still there? Did I lose you? 1, 2, 3. Are you still with me?
I'm here.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, and we'll see if you come on. Guys, if you've been watching with us, Frankie's having some internet problems. If he comes back on, we'll let him share. But Frankie, thank you so much for your time. I committed to an hour. We're now, according to my clock, an hour and 17. If you can hear me, just wave at some point so I know you can hear me. Otherwise, guys, thank you for sticking with us. I hope you've gotten as much value out of this as I have. Frankie has dropped some
I hear you. I hear you,
awesome.
But I don't know if it's...
Well, as I was saying, Frankie's dropped some huge value bombs here. Huge stuff, guys. Listen to this again. Hear what Frankie's got to say. He can help you grow your business regardless of what you do. Frankie, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it. As always, I love our chats. And as always, it could go on a lot longer. I don't think we've ever had one that we ended on time. So thank you so much. All right, everybody, make it a great day, and we'll see you on the other side.
Appreciate you, brother.